Hello and good morning. For decades, adoption has provided happy, loving homes for thousands of children whose natural parents, for one reason or another, gave them up. For some of them, as they grew older, there was a desire to lift the veil of secrecy that surrounded adoption and to find their roots. But what's it like to trace your natural parents? And how does it affect a family if a new mother or father enters the equation? Paul, you found your natural parents, didn't you? Why did you do it?
I did, Robert, yes. I was born into one of these happy, loving families just before the war. But sadly, because of the strains of the war, this extra stress was put on young parents at that time. The marriage didn't survive. It was felt by my parents that something obviously had to be done with the children. My full sister at the time was subsequently adopted by the grandparents on my mother's side. But unfortunately, she was the older child, and the grandparents felt that they couldn't deal with a younger child. So the decision was made to put me out for adoption.
How old were you then?
I was about 1 when the marriage broke up, and,
right.
and I was in a children's home till I was about 4,
right.
when I was adopted. And my father collected me on a particular day from the home I was in, I believe in Yorkshire, took me down to meet my new adopted parents in Southampton. It really was a very, very traumatic and sad occasion, because at that particular moment I said I wanted to stay with my father. He said, no, you have a bath, you'll see your father afterwards.
You can remember that?
I can remember that.
Quite vividly.
But I never saw my father. I had the bath, but my father wasn't there, and I screamed and cried and cried. And within my heart, I carried on that crying for many, many years. Sadly, the adoption wasn't a good one. My adopted parents aren't alive today. If they were here, they might say, well, we picked a tough one. And so therefore I can't talk too harshly about them. But it wasn't a good adoption. And during that time, I built up a great need, a great desire that became an obsession, that I had to find out who I am, where did I come from, why am I responsible for the things that I do or I don't do. So it was a great need.
What did you do? When
I was 14, after a particularly bad row that I'd been blamed for, I was blamed for every row that ever occurred if I was within 100 yards of the house. But I ran out from the house, and I spent 2 nights sleeping in Regent's Park, under the bushes, stuffed with paper and cardboard to keep me warm. And I had to set out my life to find out who I was, where am I going, what have I done wrong. And I made myself 3 goals, only 3, that I would marry and have a large family. I have 5 children. I would work for myself, come what may. And I would find
No, you've been telling us you succeeded with the first one. Did you succeed with the first?
Everyone. I worked for myself for 25 years.
Okay, and the third one was?
Is to find my natural parents.
And how did you set about finding them?
I wrote to the various authorities and agencies that existed at that time, and I came up blank wall after blank wall. I wrote to the juvenile courts. I started with a birth certificate that showed data from the time I was adopted. Not my age, but my parents. But it was a stonewall thing, but I wasn't going to be put off. And I persevered and persevered until, of course, eventually the law changed in the late 70s. When I succeeded in finding my father, something like 40 years after I last saw him.
Where was he?
He lives in Norfolk.
Did you meet him?
I met him, and we have a wonderful relationship.
What did you say?
It was done by letter, first of all, and as I made it quite clear to him, I said, I believe I'm your son. I'm not seeking to question the past. I only want a future. And I set my stall out as my family existed at that time, that I wasn't after anything.
What about
just
your
a
mother?
Relationship. Well, it was several years later that I found her.
They'd separated.
They'd separated. Oh yes, they'd separated and gone their own ways. Yeah. And I eventually found her in Los Angeles in 1985. And once I found her, I found my full sister, who'd been adopted by the grandparents. I found my half-sister, who lives in Virginia, and I found my other half-brother in San Francisco.
A full house.
Full house. And I found my half-brother by my father's second marriage.
Has it all turned out well?
It's absolutely wonderful.
And this need you have, it's been satisfied?
The need is fulfilled. I feel greatly enriched for the experience. I made no demands of any of them. They have made no demands of me. And it's funny, I've had 1 million questions answered, and I haven't even asked the questions.
There speaks a happy man. Do you understand them?